Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Last Week This Morning, where Mark and I recap the top stories from energy media last week. There was a lot going on. Markham posted quite a few videos actually over the weekend, and we are going to start there and talking about the hidden dangers in Canada's oil and gas ambitions. Markham, fill us in.
Thanks, MC. This is a Substack essay, and folks, you need to read it because we've been saying this for a long time now about energy modeling. So, why is energy modeling such a nerdy topic, right? I mean, who cares? But here's the thing. Thanks to Donald Trump, Canada is now looking at pivoting towards Europe and Asia, right? And
Right.
oil and gas is going to be like oil and LNG is going to be one of our major exports, according to the government and according to Alberta and so on. But you're looking out 25 years into the future. You know, you're making these investments in infrastructure and you're looking out, and you need to have some analysis, some evidence for what you think the future will look like. That's how you make decisions. And the analysis that the federal government, the Alberta government, the oil and gas industry, on and on, that they use is oil and gas demand modeling. They're basically computer models, and they're very, very sophisticated, and they use lots of global data, and then you make scenarios. And the way you make scenarios is to change the assumptions that go into them. So there are generally two, and they're a bullish one and a bearish one. So, and we're going to look at oil demand because that's what the essay dealt with. So the bullish oil demand says, well, are electric vehicles going to be cheaper than gas vehicles, 15, 20, 25 years into the future? OPEC, which says no. ExxonMobil says no. The IEA STEPS scenario says no,
Scenario.
because they assume that electric cars are going to be more expensive to buy, and then that's going to hold them back. And then a related question would be, do you think that government policy will continue to subsidize the purchase of those technologies? And all of those models would say, no, governments are losing their appetite. They can't afford it, especially in the global south. Maybe in, Europe and North America, but not in the global south where all the energy demand is going to go. So on and on and on. Those assumptions are being asked. They're asked about gas in buildings, gas in industry, on and on. And so what we've proved conclusively in the work we've done over the last couple of months is that the Canadian government is absolutely relies upon all of the bullish scenarios. The OPEC scenario, we've asked them by email. The National Energy Minister Tim Hodgson's department replied and said it's the OPEC, it's the IEA STEPS, it's ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, on and on. So it's always the bullish scenarios and not the bearish scenarios, in which you would ask a question like, are electric vehicles going to be cheaper than gas-powered vehicles? And in this one, the answer would be yes. And then
Right.
you model accordingly, because if electric vehicles displace gas, then you're going to use less oil for road transport. And so these are the kinds, this is really nerdy and very mathy, which, as we all know, I'm dysfunctional. But for a journalist, the math is not the point. The assumptions are the point, the assumptions behind the math. And that's where, as energy transition journalists, we're actually uniquely positioned, because all of the evidence, the data, the studies and so on, that you need to question the assumptions is the kind of work we do every day. So what we
Right.
did, and this, folks, I can't tell you how important this is, because I don't think this has ever been done before. Not by academic economists or government economists. I don't think it's ever been done. We took the all the major modeling that's been done by the agencies I just mentioned, and we compared the assumptions to the real world evidence. So if getting back to electric vehicles, are electric vehicles going to be more expensive or less expensive than gas vehicles? The evidence is really clear now that in the global south, in Asia, thanks to China, they're
Yeah.
already lower cost.
Hmm.
And we see already in North America, we're seeing, GM, and so they're introducing $30,000 electric vehicles. And now we're talking
Right.
about a $25,000 electric pickup truck from one of the manufacturers. So
Hmm.
the starting in Asia, the answer is yes. And what that means then is you get a bearish outlook for oil.
Right.
And so when you compare the evidence to the various bullish scenarios and the bearish scenarios, it's the bearish scenario that best fits the evidence. And the one that I think most consistent with the evidence is the IEA APS. So what does that mean for oil demand? Well, OPEC, which is the most bullish, says that demand is going to grow from 103 million barrels a day today to 120 by 2050. That's a lot of growth. And that's why you see Danielle Smith get all excited and wanting to expand the Alberta oil sands, because her industry wants a portion of that growth. They
Right.
want they want to expand their business, right? But the APS scenario, which in our opinion is the most likely, goes from 103 million barrels a day to 55 million barrels a day. 55 million barrels a day. So we're looking at like 56% maybe
Right.
of the current total. In a world where demand is half of what it is today, can Canadian oil compete? Probably not. And even if it can barely hang on by its fingertips, what kind of profits is it going to make? How much royalties is it going to pay? How much tax? I mean, they'll be scrambling and running on a shoestring budget and so on, laying off as many workers as they can, on and on. And they're a sunset industry for sure at
Right.
that point. So
Hmm.
the conclusion of the essay is that when we're doing, the kind of work that we're doing now, which is, what kind of nation building projects are we going to choose? A new pipeline is the absolute worst thing you can do, because
Right.
the APS modeling says that peak oil demand is coming in 2030 with decline starting after that. So if you built a pipeline from Alberta to Prince Rupert or Kitimat, by the time you got it finished, oil would be in decline. And the
Yeah.
very markets that you're going to be targeting in Asia and Europe, but particularly Asia, are going to be in decline. Why would you do that? That's a very, very bad strategy. But if your assumptions are wrong, you would go the other way and you would be bullish. So I can't say this enough, folks. This is, dare I say, a bit of a groundbreaker, because
Yeah.
I think that we have made the better argument for a bearish oil future than a bullish oil future, and Canada should act accordingly.
Well, and I think the scary part all of this is that Carney, Hodgson, Smith, even Eby, they've all taken that real bullish approach, and they're making decisions based on that, which is our leaders are not looking at evidence.
Yes, that's exactly right. Now, having said all of that, so why does somebody like Mark Carney, who's a really smart guy and he knows everything I'm saying, he knows
Yeah.
it, and he knows much more than I do, but he'll
Right.
go over to Europe or he'll go to Asia and he'll meet with companies that might buy, or governments that might buy LNG or heavy crude, and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, yeah, Mark. No, no, no. We want that product." Well, of course they do, because oil demand is forecast to rise a couple million barrels a day between now and 2030. We're still
Right.
in a growth scenario. And all of this industry it only operates in two speeds: full steam ahead or cutting back, because full steam ahead during a boom and cutting back
Right.
during a bust. It's boom,
Right.
bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. So when you're in a boom, when you're in growth, that they think the growth is going to last forever.
Hmm.
And that's a really bad time to start taking your advice from oil companies and pipeline companies during
Yeah.
growth, because they think that growth is going to just go on forever. And then when the bubble finally pops, they go, "Oh my God, who saw that coming?" Well,
Yeah.
the rest of us who weren't, caught up in the bubble, that's who saw it coming.
Well, I would caution you, never take your advice from oil companies. That would be my advice on this one. I so on that line, let's talk about this big announcement that Enbridge made.
Well, this was Friday. So Enbridge
Right.
is the largest pipeline company in Canada, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the largest in North America. It's big, folks, and it operates the main line that carries Canadian oil down to the United States, and then it also carries some through up into Ontario and Quebec. But most of it goes down into the U.S. refineries.
Right.
And what they did is, and I should say, I think their capacity is like 3.2 million barrels a day. And what they said was, we're going to deploy some technology, and that's mainly anti-friction agents. So to make the
Hmm.
pipeline slipperier so you can get more in, and
Right.
bigger pumps, compressor pumps on their pipeline. And the upshot of all of that is that they think they can get another 400,000 barrels a day of shipping capacity out of their existing pipes. Now, here's why that's important. There's another 250,000 barrels of capacity in smaller pipelines that could also be
Right.
optimized. So,
Hmm.
and I found this in industry, sort of trade publications, and everybody acknowledges that that's the case. So now you've got 650,000 barrels a day of new shipping. It's like another pipeline,
Right.
essentially. If you were built
Hmm.
Trans Mountain expansion, it would be the same amount of oil.
Right.
Speaking of Trans Mountain expansion, their CEO has come out publicly and said, we think using the same technologies, we can optimize our pipeline and boost by another 300,000 barrels a day. So you've got 650,000 barrels a day to the south, 300,000 barrels a day more out to,
West.
Asian
Oh, yeah.
markets. That's
Hmm.
950,000 barrels a day.
Yeah.
And what is Danielle Smith asking for? A 1 million barrel a day pipeline to Prince Rupert or Kitimat. So
Oh, no.
our message at Energy Media has been very consistent because,
Hmm.
and this, if you think of the previous story that we talked about, where oil is going to peak and decline, then you would logically not build new infrastructure that might become a stranded asset. You would optimize the infrastructure you already have. Make the best of what you've got before you build something new. Now, it doesn't stop there. Oh, there's all kinds of good news. Back in 2017, Gil McGowan, who we have interviewed on this show fairly often,
Yep.
president of the Alberta Federation of Labor, he was one of three co-chairs of the Energy Diversification Committee, and their report, which was submitted to the government in like late 2017, early 2018. This is the Notley government in Alberta. Um, it recommended the expansion of a technology called partial upgrading. So, folks, if you don't know, well, when you ship bitumen down in a pipeline, it's so thick. It's like peanut butter when you take it out of the
Right.
ground. You have to dilute it with a lighter hydrocarbon diluent, it's called, and in order to get it to flow in the pipeline. And
Hmm.
you use 20 to 30% of that pipeline will be diluent, not bitumen. Diluent has no value. So it's like empty space that
Right.
costs you actually in the pipeline. But there are technologies not developed and scaled yet, but they're out there. And that was the point of the Rachel Notley brought in a $2 billion program to scale those up. And the idea was that if you partially upgrade ultra sour heavy crude before you put it in the pipeline, you can get it down. You can essentially take the diluent out and get yourself a heavy crude or a medium crude that will flow, and you don't need diluent, and you get 30% more, up to
More.
30% more of the
Right.
pipeline without doing anything. You're basically just using your existing pipe. So if you
Yep.
take that number and you apply it to the 2 million barrels a day of raw bitumen that's going down to the United States, in theory, you would maybe get another 600,000 barrels a day. But then
Right.
apply it to Trans Mountain expansion, and you might get another, 250,000
50.
barrels a day.
Yeah.
And then and that's still not the end of it. There's another technology called DRUBIT, DRU bit. and it's diluent recovery unit. So Gibson Energy, south of Edmonton, they have a depot or and what they do is they have a pipeline and the dilbit comes down and they take it out or almost all of the diluent out, and then they put them in specially designed unit rail cars, and then they have
Right.
a unit train, and it's 104 cars, and it's designed only for that purpose. And
Right.
so they take it down to the US Gulf Coast or wherever they want to go. And it is a little more expensive than doing a pipeline, but you're not building fixed linear infrastructure. You have a
Yeah.
train, and a train can go to the US Gulf Coast, or it can go to Detroit and Chicago, or it can go to Denver, or it can go over to California, or wherever you want it to go. It's flexible, and that gives the industry optionality. If conditions are not good in one market, you go to a different market. So add all that up, optimizing existing pipe, uh, using partial upgrading, using Drubit, by being clever.
Yeah.
Instead of just doing the same old thing over and over and over again that the industry is used to, by being clever, we could make so much more of what we have rather than building infrastructure that might become a stranded asset. So when you take the two pieces together, the Substack essay that we did about the modeling and the optimize what you have, don't before you build something else, that's a powerful argument for not doing what Danielle Smith and the Alberta oil and gas industry want to do.
Right. Well, and we have all this stuff right now. We can just start doing this. We don't need to, there's no waiting period. There's no capital projects. There's nothing that has to be done. So,
On the partial upgrading side, you would have to scale up some of these, one or two of these companies.
right.
So
Correct.
we're
Yeah.
not quite there. We're very close, but it wouldn't take a lot of time, and not like building a pipeline.
Right.
And on the optimization side, that can be done fairly quickly. That can be done like in a couple of
Hmm.
years. And you would have to build unit trains. So that would take probably a couple of years. But you're not building 50-year infrastructure. So whatever it takes you, you
Right.
can respond within parameters of the oil industry. 2 or 3 years is pretty quick,
Yeah.
right? That is
Hmm.
really quick. Uh, so you can do it. And this is an area where the federal government could step in and say, you know what, instead of supporting a pipeline out to Prince Rupert, we're going to de-risk some of these new technologies, and we're going to help those companies scale them up. This is what the Americans do. The Americans take technologies that are promising, but still early stage, not as competitive as they could, competitive enough for private
Right.
capital to crowd in. And the Americans say, we're going to get you to the point of commercialization using public money, and then the private sector can take that technology and run with it. And if we
Hmm.
applied that principle here and used funds that were in the federal budget that was announced last week, and we did that, we de-risked those technologies, we could take an entirely different approach to oil and gas, and at least oil for sure, in this country, and save ourselves a lot of risk and potential downside if the oil markets crater after 2030.
Well, let's dig into the federal budget. You had Fernando Melo on the show. You had a couple of an interview, a follow-up episode, where you guys, talked about the clean electricity investment tax credit, which seems exciting. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about that. I mean, it's the federal budget kind of came out and it didn't seem so exciting, but there is quite a few details that make sense for energy transition here.
I speak from my own experience. The budget came out at 1 o'clock our time, and we had to get something out, tell people what was in it. And at
Hmm.
first glance, the climate competitiveness strategy didn't look very promising. It looked
Right.
like kind of the Trudeau area, lots of talk. Where's the beef, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and my inbox was flooded with media statements from various organizations and companies who basically said the same thing. They
Right.
complained about some aspect of it. But upon a deeper reading, And doing my interview with Fernando, who's from the Canadian Energy Association,
Hmm.
and who had, did go through it with a fine-tooth comb, the climate competitiveness strategy is all about electrification. And we have
Right.
flagged here at Energy Media, we've flagged a bazillion times that that's the future. And China and Asia and Europe are all busy electrifying their economies and their
Hmm.
technologies and so on. And that's where the Carney government, they're putting money into interconnections to create a power grid. They want to spur things like, the manufacture of electrotech, like EVs and heat pumps and batteries and all of that kind of stuff. They want to take critical minerals and build the entire supply chain here. So you go, critical minerals, battery metals, battery cells, battery plant packs, EVs. That's the supply chain basically, and they want to do that. There's going to be money. So when looking at it again, and after interviewing Fernando, my conclusion was that this is a far more robust electrification strategy than we've ever seen. And
Right.
not only that, but it's a different approach because what we use, there's still going to be a carbon tax. There'll be an industrial emitters carbon tax. And
Right.
the Carney government sees that as part of its industrial policy. But really, with the carbon tax, is like a stick. People are doing something that you don't want them to do, which is like drive big pickups and, use, lots of natural gas to make steam in your industries, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you hit them with the stick, the carbon tax, and you hit them hard enough. At some point, they're going to say, hey, you know what? We need this stick to go away. So we're going to invest in, electric arc furnaces or electric vehicle, whatever. So
Right.
that's the stick approach. The far more what other countries are doing, like China was doing it, the U.S. under Biden was doing it, Europe is doing it, lots of Asian countries are doing it. You use the carrot approach. You say, okay, you know what? If you switch from a pickup truck to an electric truck, we'll give you an investment tax credit, or we'll give you a subsidy, or we'll give you some other benefit to encourage you to do that. So it's a carrot. And usually, businesses and consumers like carrots a lot more than they like sticks.
Right. Hmm.
And at the end of the day, I know economists love carbon pricing, but we've had it now for a long time in Canada. And more and more of the people we interview are saying, you know what? It's elegant as a theory, but in practice, it just doesn't work the way the economists think it's going to work. And so we
Right.
need to move on. So this I think is the first budget because you didn't see this approach under the Trudeau governments from, over the last 10 years. This is the first one to pivot towards more of a European, Asian kind of industrial policy around clean tech and electrotech than what we've had in the past. So from that point of view, this is very exciting. And this is not the ultimate pivot. We're going to see new legislation to enact, to enable some of these ideas going forward, flesh them out, put in regulations, subsidies, whatever it's going to be. So hang on, folks. As this legislation goes through the Parliament and gets enacted, we'll be reporting on it and trying to tie it all together so that you get the big picture as well as the details of what the government is doing.
Right. And it feels like, even from a language point of view, we're really shifting into more of a focus on the economy and out of a focus on the environment, which seemed to be Trudeau's, you know, main gig. And now we're talking about the economy more. And you did a follow-up as well with Fernando, where dug deep into, what scaling would look like, Ottawa's approach to using public money. So there was more of a in-depth conversation around the Major Projects Office in that second follow-up interview.
Right. One of the things that Carney wants to do, remember, Carney's a banker and his
Yeah.
energy minister is a banker. They both came out of Goldman Sachs, decades ago, and then they went into central banking and Hodgson in particular sits on oil company boards, natural resource company boards, that kind of thing. He's a deal maker. That's why Carney brought him in, is to get deals done. Okay.
Right.
But one of the things that Biden did with the Inflation Reduction Act and other legislation, and by the way, if you haven't watched my interviews with Jigar Shah was the one of the architects of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and all of the other efforts that they did. He ran the Department of Energy's loan program, tens of billions of dollars, and he was the administration's clean energy evangelist. So
Right.
some of what Carney is doing is copying what Biden did. And Jigger has lots of insights into that because he was right at the center of it.
Right.
And what they're doing is using a little bit of public capital to crowd in, that's the phrase, crowd in private capital. So you need to de-risk some of these early stage technologies, as I mentioned earlier. How much public capital is required to do the de-risking so that private capital will then pick it up and run with it and
Run
commercialize it?
with it. Hmm.
And the amount is surprisingly small. I saw one time, if I remember this correctly, it was like, 8 or 10 billion dollars got 88, 90 billion dollars worth of private capital into battery plants in the US. So maybe somewhere between 5 and 10% of the capital cost of those projects is public capital, and then private capital picks it up and runs with it, and eventually you're going to get your money back in terms of increased taxes and employment and so on. So that's the strategy. So this is where I still see, I'm getting press releases all the time as different organizations digest what this budget means, because it is it's quite a departure from the Trudeau era.
Right.
And poor old Justin Trudeau got a bad rap. But the truth is that when he came to power in October of 2015, the focus globally was climate.
Was climate.
Everybody
Yep.
was focused on climate.
Hmm.
And so he's the first prime minister who actually said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to put in policies that will reduce that. The problem is that towards the end of, like, after 2020, other governments were pivoting away to industrial policy and different approaches, and he wasn't flexible enough to do that. So he stuck
Hmm.
with climate right from beginning to the end of his, when he stepped down in January or February. And the world had already moved on by then. The world is
Hmm.
now, Carney's policies are more in line with what global governments are doing. And it's that Trudeau's sin is not to use climate policy. It's not to recognize there was a pivot and to have Canada pivot earlier than we should have. That's the thing he did wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears again away from the budget now, and let's talk about this interview you had about deep thermal with Gord Lambert. I found this fascinating. Um, we talk a lot about wind, solar, uh, on the channel, and so let's talk about geothermal.
Okay, geothermal is an opportunity for Canada. And it's so big, it's mind-boggling, because what's happened is geothermal, when we think of geothermal, early geothermal was like Iceland. You know,
Right.
you've got volcanoes, and
Volcanoes.
there's lots of this really hot water, not too
Hmm.
far under the surface, and you just like stick a straw into the water, and then you suck it out, and you can make electricity with that hot water. You can have district heating, you can have industry, you
Right.
can have all kinds of stuff. But that's really rare. Finding pools of hot water is hard, it's expensive, and it's not the best. You can't scale it the way you can with the new technology, which is called
Right.
advanced geothermal. And there's open loop and there's closed loop. So where Canada is really taking off is closed loop. We've done interviews with Ever Technology, EAVOR, technologies out of
Hmm.
Calgary. And uh, imagine that you're Ever Technology and you have uh, two drilling rigs, and you drill down into the rock. And so you have one well bore, and then you have another well bore 50 to 100 meters away. And then you use technology developed in the oil sands that when you get down, I don't know how many kilometers, maybe a kilometer or two, let's say,
Right.
you join them up. They go like this, and then you join them here, and now it's like a radiator. Your two pipes are like a radiator. And then you do two more pipes and then two more pipes. And so what you get under the underground, in this really hot rock is like a radiator. It's exactly what it is.
Right.
You put water in at the top, and then as the water expands, you get a siphon effect, and it heats, expands, and then it comes out the other end of the pipe hot, maybe a couple hundred degrees C.
Right.
Okay. So then you take that hot water and you make electricity with it, or you use it for district heating, whatever. And Ever is just finishing its first commercial project in Germany. And this is one of the great tragedies. And I say tragedy, I'm not pulling my punches here.
Yeah.
This is a technology that Germany wanted so badly because it basically, once you get it down there, there is no end to the heat, right? You don't run
Right.
out of heat, and
Right.
it's
Right.
not
Right.
intermittent. This
Hmm.
is base load, full on, and the cost per megawatt hour is higher because it's first of its kind, but it will come down as you scale, so it's competitive with at least gas and maybe wind and solar. It's clean and it's base load. And if we're going to scale up the our grid and help others countries like the US scale up their grid, we should jump on the two, three companies, four companies that we've got in Canada who are leaders in advanced geothermal. And we should be doing what the Americans did with, their big companies and scale them up.
Right.
Scale them up. So we not only, and remember, the expertise behind this comes from the oil and gas industry.
Yeah. We already have all these experts.
We got them. We
Yeah.
have, Calgary has more engineers per capita than any other place in Canada. The place, you can't swing a dead cat in Calgary without hitting half a dozen engineers. I
Right.
swear to God, you go for lunch, you go for coffee, and there are the engineers. They're everywhere. So we have all the engineering expertise we want. We have all the rig building expertise, all of that, and it's all directly applicable to geothermal.
Yeah,
This,
and Gord pointed out in the interview that basically this is so exportable because there's a bunch of different countries and I mean not countries but regions around the world that could do something similar and also have, huge heat needs like Canada does.
oh, absolutely. And so what we talked about with Gord is while Ever is down maybe a couple of kilometers, and I'm not sure that they might go deeper, but
Right,
um, the point that Gord was making is the next generation of advanced geothermal goes down 5 kilometers. And
right, yeah,
maybe where they're headed, the goal is to go down 20 kilometers. Because when you get down that deep, now you're not making 200 C hot water, you're making 400 C. It becomes supercritical. And I asked him
hmm,
what supercritical means, and he said it's at the point you get to a temperature where the water flashes into steam and it becomes the energy density in that steam is equal to fossil fuels because that has always been
right,
the fossil fuels great benefit is the energy density in a lump of coal or a liter of gasoline is incredibly high. The energy density is way, way, way higher than a battery, which is why you can be inefficient on an internal combustion engine because you have so much energy in your fuel. That's what you get out of supercritical steam, as I understand it.
right.
I hope probably engineers in the audience rolling their eyes right at the moment, but
They're winching. Oh, oh.
this is my best. Anyway, you can Google supercritical steam and you can watch the interview and you'll get the better explanation. But anyway, this is an industry poised for growth, where
Right,
Canada is a leader, where we have expertise to scale. There, we will never be presented with a better opportunity than this. This is fantastic. And what we should do, instead of worrying about nuclear, my God, why would we worry about nuclear when we have advanced geothermal right here? Why would we worry about gas when we have advanced geothermal all the technology
right
and
now.
go hard on geothermal? Go hard. Don't worry, LNG and pipelines for gas. No, no, that's not the future. Electricity is the future, and we have the technology that is clean, it's reasonably cost, and it's abundant, infinitely abundant. We could make enough electricity using geothermal to power the world many, many, many times over. Do this. Don't do those other things. Do advanced geothermal. That was the point of the. That's our position at Energy Media.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. And I think what's connecting all of this together for me this week is just, looking at federal policy, we're seeing a shift towards a more of an economic argument. We've got geothermal innovation that's ready for us. There's opportunity in Canada, and I think that that's something to be celebrated. We don't see, even with the pipeline politics, yeah, okay, we have pipelines already. Let's maximize what we have. So there's lots of exciting things happening in Canada where we can create jobs and opportunity and, kind of link in to the transition that's happening around the world.
And we have to at this point put in a plug for one of our favorite projects, which is bitumen beyond combustion.
Yeah,
So
of course.
instead of sending bitumen, 3.2 million barrels a day of it down to the U.S. refineries, make carbon fiber out of it, make asphalt binder for roads, make graphite, set up in Alberta, build an advanced materials manufacturing industry, a sector with
Right.
many companies, and build it using bitumen as an input as a feedstock. And one of the advantages is that you can keep your extraction industry going by creating a domestic market. You don't
Hmm.
have to send it to Asia. You don't have to send it to Europe. You don't have to send it to Houston. You do it right in your own backyard. Now that's going to take 25 years to get all that done. But the best time to start was yesterday and the second best time to start is today. And we should get on.
And let's stop defending the old system and let's move into building the next one. I think for me, this
Yes.
week felt really hopeful. And even with the budget, looking at those details, it feels hopeful to me that maybe we are moving in the right direction. And I'd like to say to folks, if you like what we're doing here and you like the stories that we're putting out, please like and subscribe to our channel. Comment, we don't respond to every single comment, but we definitely read them all, and they help inspire us to, do other stories or talk about different things. If you want to support us directly, join our membership on YouTube. I'm going to put the link in the description of this video. I'm also going to put the link to the description of our Substack. So like Markham said, we put out a couple of essays last week. There's more coming. That information is so exciting and new. And we hope that you subscribe and follow us on there. We will also be back next week doing the same thing, our Monday recap. But there's lots of exciting things that are going to happen this week as well.
I want to put in a plug for us. MC, we're so Canadian, right? Like we're literally on December
Oh,
1st.
we are.
On December 1st, Energy Media goes into our 18th year. We've been around
Wow.
a long, long time. And we've put in so much work. I probably interviewed since 2019 when we started doing these Zoom interviews, maybe 3,000 experts, and half of them would be, like global experts from around the world. We've read the studies, we've read the data, we've just immersed ourselves in the energy transition. Uh, Not only we have our own theories as well. We've contributed to the energy
Right.
transition theory. Grist for another interview. Here's the point. I want our viewers to rethink what energy media is. Yes, we still do journalism. We bring you breaking stories and we do interview experts and all of that kind of stuff. But we also are thinking about this. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about the policies that Canada needs to. Should we pivot this way? Should we pivot that way? What role
Yeah.
will oil play in our economy? If we're electrifying, all of those kinds of things. Energy media, unlike any other news organization in Canada, legacy media, independent media, doesn't matter. We are thinking about the future and putting forward proposals, unique ideas for how Canada should pivot as we cope with these very difficult times. So we're not just journalists. We've taken a step by hard work. We've earned our right to
Our
call
place.
ourselves analysts, and you know, and
Yeah.
and that's what we're doing. We're thinking about, we're advancing new policy proposals. And if you like this, folks, if you think that optimizing existing oil infrastructure is the better idea, if you think that advanced materials, if you think that geothermal, share. That's the thing that you can do more than anything else to help us out. Share it with your networks, your family, your coworkers, your social media networks. Write an email to your prime minister, whatever. Share our work because we are poised now. Energy media is poised, and we're going to have some stuff coming in the new year. It's going to be really exciting for you.
Yeah,
MC is grinning because we've got some stuff
we've
planned.
got plans.
We have plans, big plans. We can't talk about them until in January, February, but they're big plans. Anyway, we're going to be expanding into Eastern Canada and into British Columbia, and it's time that for a new voice in the Canadian energy conversation. We're too dominated by oil and gas and by the incumbent utilities and oil companies. It's time for a new voice, and energy media plans to be that new voice. So watch out, here we come.
Well, on that note, folks, I want to thank you so much for staying with us right till the end, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.